And coaching is very, very amorphous in the sense of, well, what are our milestones, or how do we establish whether the coaching is working? And one of the things I always, always check is, am I evoking awareness? Well, this whole journey that I've been through has been awareness of myself and understanding how disingenuous I was being. Which in many regards, well, and for me, all through this time, it's like, okay, well, that's the way it has to be. That's okay. Whereas in fact, in leadership, it's not okay to be disingenuous.
Welcome to Narratives Leadership Story Talks, where great leaders go beyond the bottom line to create lasting impact. Join hosts Jerome Deroy and Julienne Ryan as they uncover the stories behind real-world challenges, offering practical insights to help you lead with empathy, authenticity, and purpose. Each episode dives into how leaders use storytelling to build trust, foster connection, and inspire action. Whether you're navigating workplace dynamics, driving change, or building high-performing teams.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome Deroy, CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julienne Ryan, and it's great to be here.
Great to be here. Great to see you, Julienne. Before we move on to introducing our guest, I want to remind our listeners to subscribe to the podcast, leave a review wherever you find your podcasts, and check out our YouTube channel as well. You're going to get a lot of resources in this episode's notes, so go and check that out. You can go to narrative.com, narrative.com/podcast for all of our previous episodes and our considerable archive of more than 180 episodes at this point. So without further ado, I want to welcome Kenny Leahman, who is a Master Certified Coach, MCC for short, facilitator and educator. Until he was 48, Kenny lived two covers, one as a CIA officer and another as a gay, married Mormon husband and father. He now helps others recognize their covers and understand how and when to drop cover to unlock greater impact through transparency and authenticity. Already in this bio, we're using keywords that we use all the time on this podcast, so we love that. Kenny's mantra is discover, decide, and do what matters. He specializes in value-based leadership and team alignment and has more than 6,000 hours coaching and training leaders and teams in over 25 countries. His unique outlook and skills are a result of a series of reinventions, 24 years in the CIA, 18 as a business leader, and 19 living abroad. Each element required that he adapt to and navigate new missions, leadership paradigms, and cultures, from war zones to global boardrooms. Drawing on these experiences, including 2 years in Afghanistan as a leader during the height of the war, Kenny develops and delivers experiential training programs and keynotes that educate and motivate individuals, leaders, and teams to achieve and sustain a transformative mindset reset using tactics, tools, and procedures. Kenny's passionate about people, world affairs, the environment. He's a professional photographer, an avid traveler, 80 countries and counting, and all 50 states. Wow, amazing. Well, welcome to the show, Kenny. Can't wait to get the conversation started.
Thank you. I'm really, really glad to be here.
Oh, awesome. Well, I want to kick things off the way we always do on this podcast and ask you the question we ask of all of our guests. What is an experience that has shaped who you are today?
The first thing that comes to mind, because I have a lot of watershed moments.
Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind is when I was in Afghanistan and I realized that 90 days, we were surging officers in for 90 days, when I realized that that wasn't sufficient. And so I volunteered for 1 year. And then relative to the experience and the progress and the mission, I couldn't leave after a year. So then I volunteered to stay for 2. And it was those 2 years in Afghanistan that really helped me reflect on who I am as an individual, as a leader, but specifically relative to team, because I am not a military officer. I was in a war zone and working side by side with combat veterans, with Afghans, and with a number of global partners. And it was a wake up call relative to what really matters to me.
Mm, interesting. And what emerged as, what really matters to you?
Well, first and foremost, so when I went, it was volunteer only. After I had been there, then CIA, which typically doesn't deploy its people like the military, began issuing orders essentially to officers to go. But for me, realizing that I volunteered and that it was something I was willing to die for, because that was literally a decision I had to make. Um, that sense of duty.
Mm,
I have always been about mission and duty, but I had never felt it to my core. So with each day, I was reminded of what we were there to accomplish. I think it really, really helped me realize to narrow my focus. As the leader in particular, I could not be scattered because if I was scattered and if the team was scattered, it literally was life and death.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so focus. I think focus is a really good word there.
Mm,
Yes. Well, first you gave one of our ever present words, context, given the background and what your experience was. But exp- develop a little bit more that what you mean by the focus. Like what changed in how you were delivering yourself and your work?
It's a really good question, Julienne. The element for me was the team was large. CIA is not in the chain of command of our military colleagues.
Mm,
However, I was seen as the senior leader. Therefore, I had to determine what my leadership guidance was and how it had to be palatable for I mean, they were special forces. These were significant, very, very competent military people. But then also for the Afghans and the culture, I had to be aware of what I was saying, how I was saying, how I was presenting, because I realized we all signal different things that we're unaware of. I had to become much more mindful of what I was signaling. Was I dedicated? Was I it comes down to that word focus. Could they see in me that I knew the mission, that I was focused on the mission,
mm,
and that I was prepared to do what it took to accomplish that mission?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I wonder, what that experience in intelligence and the CIA taught you about human relationships. That now, because now you're a master coach and you work with people, as I said in the bio, to uncover their authentic selves. Is I mean that's my wording. That I'm sort of paraphrasing what's in the bio there, but I'm curious if there was anything that you learned during that time that now informs how you coach people.
Well, first and foremost, there is a parallel. When every time I start with a new coach client or a team, not every time, but very often, one of the questions is, "How did you go from being an undercover CIA officer to becoming a coach?" And the element that I have come to realize is that when I retired from CIA, there was a big gap, right, in here, in the sense of that consequential contribution. In the agency and in my role, it was about developing one-to-one relationships that were deep enough for that um, person that we call either a source or a developmental to believe in me and develop and believe in the significance of our relationship to be willing to say, yes, I will spy for the US government.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Hmm.
It's a it's a capital crime. In most countries, it is a huge risk that they will take. And so the depth of those relationships were extremely important to me, very rewarding. The intimacy in those relationships. So when I realized that coaching and educating was one of the things I wanted to do, or I was feeling called to do, it's about one-to-one relationships. Coach, a coaching relationship between the coach and the coach client is one of the most intimate relationships that I have experienced. And I hear back from my clients. So there is a direct parallel. I felt that gap after retirement, and coaching has essentially filled that gap. It allows me to feel that I am literally helping to change lives. That all throughout the CIA, the mission was real. It was very tangible. And the agency is filled with all these remarkably human, dedicated, virtues-based individuals. And I feel that in coaching.
Mm. Yeah.
When you were speaking, the first thing came to mind is like your sources were putting their lives and their families and their communities on the line just by aligning with what you were working on. And and it is a catalyst to saying, we have all these trite expressions. Sometimes I put my career on the line, I put my word on the line. You really saw very impactful example of that. So I'm sure you've been serving as a catalyst for people way of thinking about how they approach their leadership in their corporate or not-for-profit jobs.
I appreciate you highlighting that, Julienne. And I had an aha while you were talking. You asked earlier, what was that experience that shaped me? I believe that I highlight Afghanistan because, yes, I had worked with sensitive sources in the past and they were at
Mm,
risk. But in Afghanistan, the Taliban and Al Qaeda issued what they called, or what we called, night letters. And they would drop these leaflets, these letters. And it said specifically, if you are working for the US government, you will be killed.
Mm.
And the individuals who worked for us were literally targeted. And very, very sad to say, but some of our individuals in my area and in other areas of Afghanistan were assassinated. One of my men was literally followed and killed and murdered in front of his family, in front of his house. So it was a new level of awareness in the sense of what they were willing, what these sources, what these partners were willing to do for us.
Hmm. Wow. Um, it's what strikes me about your background, and I think maybe, I mean, you mentioned that you felt a calling towards coaching, and you've described the parallels between your work in intelligence and creating these intimate relationships with people, and that's what coaching is about as well. I'm also curious about the I guess the aspect that's happening in parallel in your practice, which you've kind of put front and center, which is this idea of dropping covers. I mean, you had,
Mm,
essentially had a kind of a secret identity in intelligence, and an undercover one, and then you also in your life, it sounds like. And so, I guess the question for me is, how did you come to drop those covers?
uh,
And then maybe the question is similar to what your clients ask. That's you did that for yourself. Why on earth do you want to do that for other people? Help them drop their covers. After
yeah,
what seems like a lifetime, certainly, 20, 25 years or something of working in an environment where the cover was everything, and even in your personal life.
I would say your statement is spot on. The cover was active all the time. So the CIA cover, one of the things I've learned is that cover was essentially mandated to me. You are now in the agency. You will be a clandestine officer. This is expected of you to do the job and to facilitate security for yourself, for your family, but also for these sources and for the agency. And then the other cover that I was living, as a gay man and married, and that was a choice.
Mm, mm,
It was not mandated to me. It was my choice. And when I realized the dissonance in my life, I was very fortunate in the sense of very, very good marriage, very wonderful children. We even had a golden retriever. And we were living abroad, and most things people actually said to us, "Wow, the perfect family." But inside, I knew that I was lying. So lying for the CIA and lying to protect the source or whatever, that was one thing, and I had no hesitancy in that regard. Um, when the lie began to emerge in my consciousness, I became very, very dissatisfied with myself in the sense of almost to the self-loathing. What I mean, my wife doesn't know this. Why don't I share this with her? What what risk would I be taking if I did tell her? One of the things that held me back from doing it is being gay in the CIA is not acceptable if you're not out,
mm.
because it can be used
Mhm.
against you in the sense of blackmail and or whatever you're hiding. It's really no different than you have a gambling issue or an alcohol issue or a substance abuse issue, or you're cheating on your spouse, whatever. But for me, it was terrifying because I loved everything about who I was at the time, and I was fearful of tremendous loss. And that held me back. That
Mm,
really, really restrained me. I felt like, I mean, I'm so passionate about what I do and all these elements that I felt like I've never said this before. I felt like a racehorse with a bit in my mouth, and constant pulling on those reins. And I did not want to be found out.
mm. Yeah.
So when I finally decided to drop cover with my wife relative to being gay, it was because of a statement that someone else said to me. And it was, "Wow, I can feel your struggle, but how can you do this to your wife?"
Mm.
And I thought, I have not stopped to think about how this, with her being unwitting, is it really affecting her? And then the more this emerged, the more I realized that I wasn't just living a lie, I was being unfaithful in my honesty and my transparency and authenticity with her
Mm,
and with the children and with the agency. It was everything. Plus, I was a very active Mormon. I was,
Okay.
when I'm in something,
You're in.
um, when I'm in something, I'm in. And in the Mormon church and the, verbiage, it's you're active, right? You're an active Mormon. And I was devout, but I absolutely felt unworthy, even though I wasn't acting out as a gay man. It was just that identity was in conflict. It was in absolute conflict with what I knew I needed to be.
mhm,
So, came out to my wife, later came out to the agency, and I've told this story before, including on a different podcast and in a workshop that I do. There was a leader whom I really respected, and I was concerned about his response after I came out. I was not in the DC area, but I went to DC, And I said, I really need to speak with you and tell you directly before you hear this from others. And this was also a watershed moment for me. I was fearful that he would kick me out of his office. He was a former Marine, one of our most senior officers, had been my boss twice, including while I was in Afghanistan. He was my external boss. And I walked in and I can remember I was quivering, and he had a great big government desk and a huge office and all this. And he's, since I walked in, he said, "Hey, it's great to see you." I hadn't seen him in a year because I had been in Afghanistan. And he said, "There's something." He said, "What is it?" And I really couldn't speak. He said, "Let's sit down." So I sat down and I dropped cover with him and I said, "I need you to know this." And he stood up. He really didn't reply verbally. He just stood up and I thought, oh, crap. Here's this 6'5" man standing in front of me and I'm still sitting down. And he said, "You need to stand up." I thought, oh, here it comes. And he walked over and he hugged me.
Hmm.
And that hug was a manifestation that he respected me. Um, and then his words were, "Kenny, with what you have done thus far, with those inhibitions and restrictions, I'm utterly amazed. And I now want you to step forward and perform in your fullest."
Wow.
So for me, knowing that that fear and that trepidation and that hesitancy limited me, and then being given that challenge, right? That call, it was, it really, really was a call to expand myself. And that's what I believe happens to others. And I don't want anyone else to live in that fear factor and in that diminished self.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. He saw your courage on more than one level, and then he gave you a new call to courage to
Right.
present yourself to your group in a new way.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we talk about, I mean, obviously we use the word leadership, and it's right there in the title of the podcast. But one of the things that I really appreciate about you sharing that story is, the vulnerability that you didn't shy away from, and that's number one. But then also, there are just so many examples of leadership in action in that story. So one stood like just who you were, the decision you made, that's a leadership decision of how you decided to lead your life. And then the response of this person, your own leader, and his act of leadership in how he decided to respond to that. And then, as you said, Julian, give you another call to action, right?
Hmm.
The phrase that came to my mind as I was listening to you, um, is that, you know, years ago, a mentor of mine said that, leaders need to be able to kind of understand who they are in relationship to themselves. So that's self-awareness,
Mm.
but also just as importantly in relationship to others. And so when you talked about the moment where someone said, "I wonder what it's like for your wife," suddenly you were becoming more and more self-aware to the point that you had to drop that cover just for yourself. You were noticing how detrimental it was for you, and
Hmm.
then realized it's also detrimental to people around me. And that's when it becomes really untenable, right? But as leaders, if I transfer that to kind of the leadership realm or business realm, wherever you're a leader in your life, it really is about sort of understanding who you are to yourself and to others. Because without that, it's probably you're not going to be the greatest leader.
And y- ab- so I agree with all of what you just said, and I'm glad that it landed with you in that regard, and your verbalization of some of those elements have also given me greater awareness. So as a coach, International Coach Federation certified coach, there are competencies, and one that really, really matters to me is to evoke awareness.
Mm,
And as I coach others, well, and coaching is very, very amorphous in the sense of, well, what are our milestones, or how do we establish whether the coaching is working? And one of the things I always, always check is, am I evoking awareness?
mm,
Well, this whole journey that I've been through has been awareness of myself and understanding how disingenuous I was being.
mm,
Um, which in many regards, well, and for me, all through this time, it's like, okay, well, that's the way it has to be.
right.
Mhm.
That's okay. Whereas in fact, in leadership, it's not okay to be disingenuous. And so another significant moment was when I left Afghanistan and I became one of the principal educators for the new officers in the CIA, and always saying to them, you have to be self-aware. Unless you are self-aware, you can do harm. And most CIA officers, undercover officers, are soloists. They don't have a senior officer out with them, meeting with their sources and or whatever, and coming back and doing the reporting. How genuine, right? So there was that element of my life where it was like, sacrosanct, zero tolerance for anything inauthentic. And then on the flip side, it was just complete opposite. So I
Yeah.
just couldn't live with it anymore.
Wow.
I want to acknowledge your leader because I'm sure in his time he didn't get to that role without having dodging live bullets and scenarios. And you were passing along this bit of truth,
Hmm.
and he had a choice and how he chose to receive it and react to it with you. And he did it in an incredible way, in a very kind and supportive way, and a mature that really showed the nature of him as a human and a man. And yeah, yeah, and in all fairness too, having lived through the 80s and the 90s, it was and witnessing friends coming out, it's maybe challenging now in a lot of ways, but it was a whole different ball game of what identity was and the risks people were taking in normal, like everyday New York or urban life where I lived in, which was much more open minded about things, but not always in that situation. So yeah.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
very much.
I want to, incredibly, we're getting to the half-hour mark.
Ugh.
Well, it's not incredible because, but unfortunately we are, is the word I was looking for. But the thing that I wanted to say was that, you know, you, I'd love to hear more about your work as a coach in terms of helping people with what you call dropping these covers, right? Because I'm assuming not everyone who comes to you is a former intelligence or, uh, you know, is in the Mormon church and married, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of, I mean, maybe there are, yeah, I'm sure there's lots of people who hide in that way. But I'm sure you also have people from different stripes and who are struggling with other kinds of covers, perhaps. And without any, I want to respect confidentiality, obviously, without naming names. But can you give us some examples of some of the changes that you've seen people go through in your line of work whenever you coach them?
One of the things that emerges very frequently is imposter syndrome. And so in addition to coaching, I'm an educator. I have my own training institute, the KEL Institute, where I develop and deliver workshops. And the one workshop that has really resonated with a lot of people, not just gay people, not just Mormons who were trying to pretend to be an active or a worthy Mormon, but all stripes. I like that you use that word. And it's called Everyone Lives a Cover. The impact on living and leading with authenticity. And what emerges among my clients is I've been promoted, I've been respected, I'm here, but when are they going to find out that I'm really not as competent as they think I am?
Right.
which really is no different from when are they going to find out that I'm gay?
Right.
Um, because so as I have done my research, so I didn't just create this workshop. I've done a tremendous amount of research in the sense of what constitutes self-awareness, but also cover. What are the various covers? And with the International Coach Federation, confidentiality is a principal element of the ethics code. So everyone knows with me, and often joke and say, I've been paid to keep secrets for a long time, right? So everything's confidential here. But one of the things that emerges is family elements. I do whenever a client is interested or wants to, I do what I call a values equation. And we walk through their values in the sense of how much does the value matter to you, but how much are you living in that value? Because we can name all of our core values, but unless we get very deliberate about, okay, I rank it as a 10, but I'm living it at a 5. Well, where's the cover element? What needs to be uncovered so that you live more where the values are leading you and where you're true to those values? And oftentimes so one individual in particular, this was a very senior military officer who had become an admiral, and she was also a doctor. So, I mean, she's highly, highly competent, and she was promoted to the next level, and the coaching was all about her not feeling worthy, her not feeling like wondering, is this because I'm a woman? Is this because I have all these degrees? And we were able to have her realize her own value. And often people are just so fearful of failure. It's like, well, what if I fail? Um, so I'm realizing as I say that one of my principal concerns was this will be seen by others as me failing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I have failed. I wasn't able to um, get well. A lot of people, when they talk about being gay, it's like it's not like a cold. it's
Yeah.
it's not going to go away if I take a lot of vitamin C. I said I was a devout Mormon. I prayed for this to be lifted from me. And that fear factor lives in a lot of individuals who are in leadership. It's like, oh wow, when am I going to be found out?
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
in this workshop, people, it's not Kenny lecturing. It's very, very interactive, and a lot of stuff emerges in the sense of, I didn't realize that cover is holding me back.
Right. Yeah. Love it. I just at this point want to let our listeners know that you can find out a lot more about that in the episode notes. We have dropped links in there that will give you more information and obviously ways to connect with Kenny as well, and as well as with us if you have any questions about that. But really love what you're doing and just the journey we've been on, because it feels like a journey that we've been on with you. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself today. And, I have no doubt in my mind that you are the best person to be running that particular workshop that you just described and to be a coach, because of your willingness to put yourself out there in this way, which is not always, as we all know, it's not a given. So, so thank you very much. It's very, very appreciated. To close this off, is there anything else you would like to add, Kenny, or to share with our audience? Yeah, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for your words. Thank you for believing that this story is worth hearing and worth telling. The thing I would like to leave with individuals is don't rest comfortably in where you are. Always question where you are and be willing to step into a new challenge. And the other thing is coaching matters. Coaching literally changes lives. And for those leaders who are out there saying, "Yeah, but I don't need to be coached," you're the ones who really you're the ones who really need to ask yourself. I always bring 3 questions, and I'll leave this with all the guests and the listeners. Who am I? Think about that deeply. Don't just answer that right off the top of your head. Who do I want and need to be? And how do I get there?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Julienne. Yeah.
Yeah, just one last thing. I think the phrase that came to mind a few times is the ripple effect. We may never hear from some of the listeners who heard this podcast or passed it on to somebody or wrote about it, but I know this one is going to have an incredible ripple effect for anyone who's
Mm.
listened to it and watched it.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. I
Good.
hope. I do. I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that is the intention. And I have no doubt it will. Well, thank you very, very much for being our guest today, Kenny. Thanks, Julienne, for being my wonderful co-host as always. And I want to thank you, our listeners, for being here as well, for watching us on YouTube and listening through your devices. We really appreciate that. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. That way you will never miss an episode. It'll be right there in your feed without you having to think about it. And if you find a time to do it, please leave a review because that does drive word of mouth and helps us find new listeners so that they can get the insights and wisdom from people like Kenny and the many other guests we've had on this podcast so far and had the privilege to talk to. So thanks so much. As always, don't forget to go to narrative.com, NARATIV.com, if you want to get in touch with us. We're always ready to listen to you and to your stories and help you tell better stories for whatever context you might be in, whether that's a group training or whether that's one-on-one coaching. We're always here to help and happy to listen. All right. Well, with that, thanks so much, everybody. And I wish you all a great rest of your day and week. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Cheers. Thank you.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.